Why the left is so consumed with hate, and that's definitely going to be the title of this video, in quotes, with Wall Street Journal in front of it, because I never like doing a blanket sweep on the left. Forgive me, because I know I have before, and I try to be more cognizant of the effects of blanketing every single person on the left or the right with a certain idea. And I think one of the reasons people say that Tim Pool's an honest journalist is that Tim Pool, I shouldn't refer to myself in the third person, is that I don't like to ascribe labels to people that they don't ascribe for themselves, right? Am I using that word right? Maybe I'm not. The point is, if someone says, I do not believe in these things, I'm not going to claim they do. I'm not going to assume people are lying all the time, but sometimes I will if I believe they're lying. Anyway, the point is, we have this article from the Wall Street Journal about why the left is consumed with hate. They say, lacking worthy menaces to fight, it is driven to find a replacement for racism. Failing this, what is left? It's got a lot of shares. It's from a couple days ago. I do believe that, generally speaking, on the left, they're extremely hateful. I also believe that there are many people on the right who are extremely hateful, but I have to admit, look, this is the most annoying thing for me, is that there is reality. There is a difference between the left and the right, and it is entirely possible the left is more hateful than the right. My Twitter is split rather evenly among the left and the right and mainstream sources. And I will tell you, following the Kavanaugh hearing, the left was insanely vitriolic, terrifyingly. My God, I unfollowed some people out of the insanity, wishing rape on women. I was shocked. There was one where it said something like, I certainly hope you all, are sexually assaulted and abused so you know what it feels like. And I'm like, dude, I don't want Christine Ford to feel the way she does. I just need evidence. I mean no ill will or disrespect to anyone, right? But I also know that we need to do everything we can to uphold a standard to protect the innocent, including Blasey Ford. And that means if you have no evidence, there's nothing we can do. I know it gets more nuanced and complicated. We want to talk about the FBI investigation and all that stuff. The point I'm trying to make is that, my God, the hate I saw terrifies me. The hate for white men terrifies me. You can be critical of assholes, and certainly there are many white men who are, but to claim that all white men are assholes is terrifying. That is racist and sexist, and it worries me about where we are going as a country as this cultural civil war progresses. Let's read the story. So this is from Shelby Steele. She says, even before President Trump's election, hatred had begun to emerge on the American left. Counterintuitively, as an assertion of guilelessness and moral superiority. At the Women's March in Washington the weekend after Trump's inauguration, the pop star Madonna said, I have thought an awful lot about, I'm not even going to read that quote. Madonna said that she wanted to do something that would be considered an extreme act of violence that is entirely illegal, and I'm not even going to read the quote, period. Here, hatred was a vanity, a braggadocio meant to signal her innocence of the sort of evil that in her mind the White House represented. For many on the left, a hateful anti-Americanism has become a self-congratulatory lifestyle. America was never that great, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo recently said. For radical groups like Black Lives Matter, hatred of America is a theme of identity, a display of racial pride. For other leftists, hate is a license. Conservative speakers can be shouted down, even assaulted on university campuses. Republican officials can be harassed in restaurants, in the street, in front of their homes. Certain leaders of the left, Maxine Waters comes to mind, are self-appointed practitioners of hate, urging their followers to think of hatred as power itself. How did the American left, conceived to bring more compassion and justice to the world, become so given to hate? It began in the 1960s, when America finally accepted that slavery and segregation were profound moral failings. That acceptance changed America forever. It imposed a new moral imperative. America would have to show itself redeemed of these immoralities in order to stand a legitimate democracy. Well, let me stop right here. This is an extremely, extremely biased op-ed. Like, I've seen some pretty good op-eds from conservatives who can, politely and respectfully say, this is what the left is doing and why I think so, but this in itself breeds vitriol. First of all, I believe America does have to redeem immoralities. I don't think we accomplish that with authoritarian identity politics. We don't redeem this country by using hate and attacking people, but we can certainly redeem this country by, as I mentioned in my previous video, doing all we can to lift up the poor of any race, identity, creed, national origin, etc. This is a pretty, opinion. Wow, Wall Street Journal, I'm surprised. The genius of the left in the 60s was simply to perceive the new moral imperative and then to identify itself with it. Thus, the labor of redeeming the nation from its immoral past would fall on the left. This is how the left put itself in charge of America's moral legitimacy. The left, not the right, not conservatism, would set the terms of this legitimacy and deliver America from shame to decency. This bestowed enormous political and cultural power on the American left and led to the greatest array of government-sponsored social programs in history, at an expense, by some estimates, of more than $22 trillion. But for the left to wield this power, there had to be a great menace to fight against, a tenacious menace that kept America uncertain of its legitimacy, afraid for its good name. This is really long. I don't necessarily want to. I don't like reading entirety of articles, but I suppose for the sake of commentary, I should do this. This amounted to a formula for power. The greater the menace to the national moral legitimacy, the more power redounded to the left. And in the 60s, handed the left a laundry list of menaces to be defeated. If racism was necessarily at the top of the list, it was quickly followed by a litany of bigotries ending in ism and phobia. The left had important achievements. It did rescue America from an unsustainable moral illegitimacy. It also established the great menace of racism as America's most intolerable disgrace. But the left's success has plunged into its greatest crisis since the 60s. The Achilles heel of the left has been its dependence on menace for power. Think of all the things it can ask for in the name of fighting menaces like systemic racism and structural inequality. But what happens when the evils that menace us begin to fade and then keep fading? Well, I do believe we still have instances of systemic racism and structural inequality. And I believe Eric Weinstein, for instance, is in a similar area where I am. I do not hold these opinions lightly. As you know, I am extremely centrist. People call me a radical centrist, and that's because there's too much information that I haven't consumed in order to fully understand a lot of these issues. But I have done a lot of research in particular areas, and I've made documentaries about this, and I do believe, at least to a certain degree, there have been damaging practices and policies of our past which have led to structural and systemic racism. The real estate market is a really good example. When we look at what goes on in Ferguson, really good example. St. Louis has always been a really great example of systemic racism. You can't expect someone born in an impoverished neighborhood that is entirely racially segregated to have the same opportunities as those who grew up in a wealthier racially segregated area. Chicago is extremely racially segregated, and this draws racial tensions that I believe that we can rectify through just cohabitation. Like, we need people to live in proximity to one another, and we need to do what we can to lift up the poorest, not necessarily based on race. And thus we can rectify a lot of the racial and systemic inequalities that exist within our country. Certainly there are people that believe that it can't be done for racist and racial reasons, but I personally believe that we can do great to build a better future for everybody. I do not agree with a lot of this opinion, which is rather disappointing because I do believe there's a lot of hate on the left. They say, a single white-on-black shooting in Ferguson, Missouri 4 years ago resulted in a prolonged media blitz and the involvement of the President of the United States. In that same four-year period, thousands of black-on-black shootings took place in Chicago, hometown of then-President, yet they inspired very little media coverage and no serious presidential commentary. But there are reasons for this. I did an interview with a woman who talks about this a lot. They are absolutely focused on black-on-black crime. There are organizations within their communities that are fighting that, and they are also dealing with police brutality and things of this nature. There's I can't remember his name, but there is a Black Lives Matter activist. He went to the Mother of All rallies, that's what it's called, with all Trump supporters, and eventually they were like at odds with each other, but they invited Black Lives Matter up on the stage, and the guy said that we are not opposed, we do not hate cops. He said, we are not anti-cop, we are anti-bad cop. We are Americans, and we deserve our God-given, rights within this country, and everyone clapped and cheered for it, and I said, bingo, that's what we need. Naturally, a lot of people started saying that, oh no, like the government, the media, they're going to react, they can't have this. But no, some media actually reported on this. And to me, it was one of the greatest moments in the history of our cultural conflict. When you actually sit down and talk with, people who are associated with Black Lives Matter, there's calm and rational arguments that they'll make. And they have real good points. I literally did a documentary about this. Unfortunately, there are high-profile individuals on either side who want to fan the flames to gain power. And it's not just the left that needs a menace. Everyone needs a villain to fight against. They need a cause. Like this guy, when he said that we want, our American rights, and I said, and you absolutely deserve them. And if that means you need to stand up and fight for them, I am right there next to you, because everyone in this country, no matter who you are, what you believe, what you look like, what you do, I will defend to the death your human rights, period. This includes those who would be falsely accused. Human rights extend to all facets of life. I want to get back to the point. Let me just end that one point by saying the right to due process, the presumption of innocence, these are not necessarily just about government. I do not think someone should have their life tarnished simply because they're a certain person of a certain race or identity or gender, or because they've been accused of something. It all has to be proven. I believe that everyone is deserving of their rights, period. But I want to talk about this because I don't necessarily want to... It's an okay article. I think they're missing a lot. But the point is, in terms of what they're saying, well, maybe I'll just end by saying this. My Twitter feed was inundated with ridiculous hate, presumptions of guilt, insults, derision. Good friends of mine, I was shocked to see posting videos just saying the meanest and most vile, disgusting things about Brett Kavanaugh, who has not been proven to have done anything wrong. I will not condemn a man without evidence. I will certainly condemn all of the politicians for how they've handled this, but I'm not going to hold it against Kavanaugh or Christine Blasey Ford, who are human beings who are doing what they think is right and are being attacked by the media, who are receiving death threats, and are absolutely being used by the political class of this nation as pawns for their agendas. Certainly, Kavanaugh believes things and has served in this government as well. But I know full well the Republicans grandstanding themselves, saying things like, what a sham, what a disgrace, and I'm like, yeah. And what happened with Gorsuch, and what happened, like, we can play this game, both sides do it. Brett Kavanaugh was right when he said what goes around comes around. Because I don't believe this started with the Democrats or the Republicans, but it certainly goes back forever, where there is this back and forth between whoever's in power to wield it against those, and thus we see the exemplification of the double standard. The point is, for the longest time when I was growing up, I felt like there was a lot of hate on the right. It was dominated by this dogmatic Christian, Catholic conservatism type thing. And now it's not really so much. Now the left is dominated by an authoritarian dogma that is full of hate. And I am saddened to see good friends of mine spewing the same vitriolic, hateful nonsense that I never imagined they would have stood behind. And it breaks my heart. And this is why I want nothing to do with any of it. Anyway, I'm going to get out of here. I can rant for days. You know I can. So stick around. I'll have more videos up tomorrow on the main channel at 4, and I'll see you then.